The hearing room buzzed with tension papers, shuffled, cameras clicked, the weight of performance hanging thick in the air. Senator Ron Wyden leaned forward, his voice dripping with forced civility. Congresswoman Crockett, perhaps if you spent more time reading the legislation than rehearsing sound bites, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She looked up slowly, eyes steady. Well, Senator, maybe if you listened as much as you lecture, we wouldn't be wasting America's time. Silence. Audible. Dense. Someone coughed. Another stifled a grin. In that instant, the internet caught fire. But how did we get here? And why did her response go viral across the country? It was supposed to be another routine oversight, hearing one of dozens that came and went without a ripple. But the topic that day, judicial accountability and civil rights enforcement, wasn't routine for the communities it affected. It was personal, and the tension was already simmering when Ron Wyden, known for his measured tone and bipartisan polish, veered off script. He wasn't asking questions. He was performing dominance, interrupting, reframing, undermining. And Jasmine Crockett, first-term congresswoman, civil rights attorney, and one of the few black women in that room, became the target of that shift. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't thrown accusations. But something about her presence, her clarity, her refusal to be small seemed to rattle him. Wyden's words were cloaked in institutional language, but the subtext was clear: know your place. And that's what made what happened next so explosive. Because Crockett's response wasn't just a retort, it was a reckoning. It was every marginalized voice forced to smile through condescension, suddenly choosing not to. This wasn't about political theater anymore. It was about who gets to speak in America and who's expected to stay silent. And what happened next wasn't just a clapback, it was a cultural reckoning. For decades, Ron Wyden built his image on balance. The reasonable centrist, the bridge builder, the one who could disagree without condescension. He gave speeches about respectful discourse, about keeping the temperature down. On paper, he was the adult in the room, but paper fades. And over time, something else crept in. Maybe it was seniority, maybe it was habit, or maybe it was the quiet belief that respect was something owed, not shared. In recent years, Wyden's tone in hearings had sharpened, not overtly, but unmistakably. His questions weren't just questions. They became traps. His smiles, tight and transactional. He would interrupt, correct, insert legal jargon not to clarify, but to confuse. And all the while, he still claimed the mantle of civility. His contradiction wasn't loud, but it was persistent. He'd say, let's not make this political moments after making it deeply personal. He'd talk over newer members, especially women of color. He didn't shout. He didn't insult. That wasn't his style. His power was more insidious, institutional invisibility. The kind that goes unchallenged because it wears a suit and speaks in measured tones. But then came Jasmine Crockett, young, black, sharp, unbothered. And for once, his usual tactics didn't land. Because this time, his target wasn't backing down. The hearing had moved into dangerous territory lines, being crossed beneath layers of decorum. Wyden leaned in again, this time with less restraint. You seem to be confusing this bill with another congresswoman, he said, voice laced with paternal scorn. If you had actually read Section 4, I did, she replied evenly. He cut her off. Then you must have misunderstood it. A ripple moved through the room. Staffers shifted uncomfortably. One aide dropped their pen. A few exchanged glances that said what couldn't be said out loud. Did he really just say that? Wyden pressed on, voice rising. Frankly, I don't think this is a conversation for Twitter clips and sound bites. We're here to legislate, not to perform. Jasmine Crockett didn't speak, didn't blink. She sat still, her silence heavier than words. And that's when it hit. Wyden wasn't debating, he was dismissing. Not her argument. The air tightened. Viewers across the country would later replay this moment frame by frame, the leaning, the finger pointing, the look of someone so sure he couldn't be challenged. But Jasmine wasn't shaken. She was waiting. And then, in a single breath, she turned the entire narrative on its head. With all due respect, Senator, Crockett began, her voice low, deliberate, and unshaken. I don't need a lecture on seriousness from a man who once said. She paused, pulling a small folder from the stack in front of her, and I quote, "It is not the job of government to silence voices that make us uncomfortable. That was you." July 2018. Wyden froze. The room didn't move. Crockett continued, "Yet here we are, and you've spent the last 5 minutes trying to belittle mine." She leaned in just slightly. "Let's talk about Section 4. You referenced it earlier. What you conveniently left out was subsection C language you personally amended, which clearly states that community oversight boards must include civilian representatives. That's not a misreading, that's the law, and you know it." An audible gasp broke the silence. A staffer's eyes widened. "And if you really believe we're not here to perform," she said, eyes fixed on him, "then maybe stop treating accountability like theater." Wyden opened his mouth, a half-formed retort rising, but he couldn't land it. Not this time, because Crockett had the floor. And the truth, within seconds, social media lit up. The moment clipped, captioned, and catapulted across the internet. Crockett Clapback exploded on Twitter. TikTok stitched the exchange in real time. Commentators called it surgical. Activists called it long overdue. One headline the next morning read, "Freshman Congresswoman outclasses Senate veteran in viral hearing showdown." But Crockett wasn't smirking. She wasn't grandstanding. She was calm, centered. A storm that didn't need thunder. Wyden glanced down at his notes, searching for something that wouldn't come. The performance was over. The crowd wasn't with him anymore. And Jasmine Crockett, she didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She had spoken the kind of truth that doesn't echo, it detonates. But outside that room, her words would ignite something even bigger. Within hours, the clip spread like wildfire. No graphics, no edits, just raw footage of Jasmine Crockett refusing to shrink. TikTok lit up with duets, young women mimicking her cadence, mouthing the now iconic line. "Maybe if you listened as much as you lecture," reaction videos poured in. Faces stunned, smiles growing in real time. On Twitter, it wasn't just activists or journalists. Everyday people, nurses, students, teachers, mothers shared the video with the same caption. "This is how you check power with grace." Political commentators across the spectrum chimed in. One headline read, "Crockett delivers a masterclass in dignity under fire." A panelist on a national morning show said, what she did wasn't just political, it was personal. She stood in truth and didn't blink. Especially among Black and brown women, the response was visceral. Not because it was loud, but because it was unapologetically composed. They saw themselves not just in her words, but in her restraint, her precision, her presence. Wyden's office released a short statement, something about spirited debate. It fell flat, because the verdict was already in. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win the moment she rewrote it. And yet, it wasn't the moment that mattered most. It was what she said after the cameras stopped rolling. In the quiet that followed the chaos, Jasmine Crockett didn't just claim victory, she reframed the entire story. This wasn't about one heated exchange or a fleeting moment of triumph. It was about a deeper truth. Dignity always triumphs over arrogance, and service will outlast selfishness. She reminded us that America's greatest strength isn't found in the loudest voices or the harshest attacks, it's found in resilience. In those who stand firm, who refuse to be erased or silenced, even when the odds seem stacked against them. This country, Crockett said, was built not by screams, but by steady hands and unbreakable spirits. Her words carried the weight of generations, those who fought quietly, who persevered without fanfare, who understood that real power comes from patience and principle. And in that moment, the audience wasn't just watching a political win. They were witnessing a call to rise above the noise, to reclaim dignity as our loudest statement. Because in the end, dignity speaks louder than hate. And it's that truth that will carry us forward. Ron Wyden tried to silence one voice, but instead, he amplified millions. Jasmine Crockett showed us all that clarity cuts through chaos and dignity outshines power games. If you believe in standing tall in rooms not built for you, this is your moment. Subscribe, share, and stay loud. Because the next voice that changes everything might just be yours. Don't let silence be your default. Join the movement. Speak with courage. And keep the fight alive because history remembers those who refuse to be quiet.